Hey everyone, and welcome back to Build UX. In this episode, we're going to finish out our menu component and then continue on with the rest of the UI in our app. Where we left off last episode is we started getting our menu established in terms of the surrounding component. We got the responsive width and padding inside of the menu itself. So now it's a good time to finish out styling the internal contents that we see here. So let's take a look at our mobile mockup, and we'll start with this lower breakpoint. We need to establish the bottom spacing between these elements, which I believe is space quad because it should match what we have between the links in our social section here. So let's find our menu close button. We know that this is going to be for a smaller breakpoint. So it's a media max width 575 pixels. Open that up. The menu close we should target is going to have a margin bottom of space quad. Okay. If we open up our inspector tools and the responsive design mode, we can now see that spacing there. Let's continue on with getting our remaining elements styled here. Let's see what margin we'll need at a desktop breakpoint for that close button. So looking at our desktop mockup, it looks like we increase that to be the space oct or 128 pixel equivalent. So copy this media query down, and we'll say at a min width of 576 pixels, we'll change this to be space oct. Give that a quick check. Looks like that's working as expected. And let's get our preview here refreshed, just so we know we're at that minimum breakpoint that we need to support. So that takes care of our close button. Let's turn our attention to these links that we see inside the menu. So this unordered list, we can give a class of menu items. And then if you recall in a previous episode, we mentioned that we like to use the plural parent pattern. So each of these list items will just be menu item, singular. To speed things up, let's grab the opening tags of each of these list items and add the class as needed. Give that a save, nothing should change. The links themselves, let's again grab these using Control or Command D. Add a class of T-link as the typography class that we want applied. That's looking pretty close. So now we'll focus on getting rid of this left padding, the list style type, and then getting the spacing we want between the elements. In our app.css, let's create a new section here. We may not need a original block for menu close because there is no default styles shared across all breakpoints, so we can just delete that. And then below that, let's make sure our icon is grouped with the close button. Let's start styling our menu items. So the first thing we want to do is inspect it. And we can see we have both margin and padding. So let's clear off margin and padding. We might be setting margin bottom in just a minute, so we'll make sure that we clear the top, left, and right, but leave the bottom alone so we don't overwrite that. Let's set the list style to be none. And if we take that away, we're looking a lot closer. So now each item needs spacing between each of the links. So if we inspect here, looks like 32 pixels. So let's go into menu item and give it a margin bottom of space default in our variable here, or space double, I should say. That's looking much closer to our mockup now. The menu items itself, the unordered list, will have margin bottom, as I mentioned. So let's take a look at what we have for that. And this is actually on desktop, so let's make sure we inspect the mobile styles first. So on desktop, it was 128 pixels. We'll keep that in mind. Let's make sure our link spacing holds true. Yep. So we just have to inspect the bottom. It looks like space quad will be for menu items at a mobile breakpoint. So media, max width 575. Menu items Margin bottom is going to be space quad. And then we'll copy this whole media query out, holding Shift and Alt or Shift and Option and the arrow keys to copy it down. Let's say at a min width of 576, the margin bottom is going to increase to be space oct for that 128 pixels. And just to keep things cleaner so we're not overwriting margin bottom unnecessarily, let's make this more explicit. So the margin top is 0. And there was no margin left or right, so we're actually good with that. Make sure that's what we want in our live preview here. It's looking good, no margins on the top. We have the margin bottom we're looking for. And it should increase as we go to a larger breakpoint. All right, that actually takes care of our menu links here. Let's focus our attention on the social section of our menu. So we'll take a look at our design mockup here. Looks like we're going to use tcopy large as the type spec for connect with a subdued color. And then these might work as the button icon component. We'll just add some customization for the border radius and the border itself. So taking a look at our HTML here, we have connect and each of the links here. Since we want all of these elements to align, we might need to add a wrapper div here. Let's call it menu socials. Open that up. We'll grab our call to action and these links. So each of these links will be the menu social, singular. And then let's call this connect text menu social CTA for call to action. We also know that the CTA will use tcopy large as its type spec. So let's get that added and then take a look at our preview. Getting pretty close here. We'll create a new section under menu items. So menu socials, we'll want the layout of that to be display flex. And the flex direction in this case should be row. It's looking good. We want to align items center. Perfect. Okay. Now, each of our social buttons, we actually need to add the class of button icon. Give that a save. And then inside of each of these, let's do a quick little refactor. So we'll add some spacing. Both these text labels won't be shown, so we can add screen reader only to those. Pop that open, grab our text contents, cut them out, and then we'll paste them inside. And then after these, we'll bring in the respective social media icons. So let's go into our assets folder, icons. We'll grab Facebook first, paste it in. Let's add a class of button icon. We'll set its role to be presentation. Looking good. We'll do the same thing for the Twitter icon. Grab that, close out the file we don't need. Paste that in. Again, class of button icon. And a role of presentation as well. Cool. If we give this a save, let's see, we're actually getting quite close here. Let's double check that padding on the bottom of our menu to make sure we get that in place. So real quick, just to make it easier to inspect right now, but we'll need it anyway. Padding bottom should be space quad. I wonder what's going on here. Let's inspect. Interesting. So it may be because of the absolute positioning and the fixed positioning of our menu. It seems like the padding isn't really being respected in terms of the bottom of this menu. So one thing we can do is maybe use our menu socials class to provide a margin bottom. Let's see if this fixes it for us. So margin bottom, we're going to want it to be space quad. And hopefully this will fix it up for us. Okay, so now we have plenty of room. We need to provide margin so it knows how much space to leave at the end there. Okay, turning our attention back to each of the social buttons, menu social. Let's say their border radius is going to be 50%, and the border itself is going to be 0.2 rems, and it looks like we use the lighter gray. We'll have to set the same thing on the CTA there. So it's 0.2 rems, solid, and the charcoal 46. See if this looks good. All right, so they're abutted next to each other. Let's get the spacing between them going. So it looks like we want 16 pixels on the left of each of these. So margin left is going to be the space default. Looking really good. So we have a nice hover pattern here. Let's see if we like the default focus state. Yep, that should be pretty good. Nice and explicit around what you're focusing on. So let's get the color added to the connect CTA, and that might do it for some of the contents inside the menu. So menu social CTA. I think all we need to do is set the color to be that lighter gray. Give that a save. I think we're good to go. Let's just do another spot check here. It's looking good in terms of the mobile menu. Take a look over at our desktop menu. One thing that we need to do on desktop is only show the non-repeated links. So let's make sure we get that in as well. So we can target the links that are just for mobile here. It looks like food, health, low carb, and nutrition would be the ones that we want to hide on desktop. So using Control or Command D, let's select these first 4 here, and we'll say menu item, mobile only. With this modifier class now, we can go to our menu item. And actually we'll want to wrap this in a media query. So max width of 575 pixels. We'll want to set these to be display block. And then outside of this media query, by default, if we were to copy that over, we want it to be display none. We can actually say that this is at a min width of 576 pixels. Just to be clear what we're trying to do with this responsive style. Shift that below, make sure indentation looks good. Give that a save. So now what we should see is more links provided for mobile users because we no longer have the center navigation shown. And then as the breakpoint increases, we simplify the menu a bit. And that's because we have the center nav to use. So if we now were to take away the menu is open class, looks like we might need to adjust that breakpoint because we don't actually show the center nav links until that 786 breakpoint. So let's bump these up. So 786 for the base media query, and then 787 is when we'll hide them. Okay, so now what we should have is those links being traded out for the center nav into this menu here on the right. Cool, so I think we're done styling the contents of our menu at all breakpoints. Let's do one quick check here just to make sure we like how everything looks. And it's looking good. Let's take off these modifier classes from our menu, as well as our overlay, to get our UI reverted back to a default state. And I think the last thing we'll do in this episode is get the margin bottom on our header established across all breakpoints, and that'll set us up to continue on with the rest of the UI. If we take a look at our mockups, one thing we can do here is just turn on the spacing. So we can see at this larger breakpoint, we use space quad here. What if we take a look at our mobile mockup and turn on the spacing layer here as well? It looks like we're going to go down to space double. So let's add this margin at the same time that we increase the overall height of the header, and that's at that 1024 breakpoint. So let's go to our header class one last time. Scroll down here, 1024 is already set up for us. So the margin bottom at a smaller breakpoint will be space double. And then at a larger breakpoint, if we copy this down and modify it, will be space quad. Okay, I think that's everything in our global header. I know this took quite a few episodes to accomplish, but that's because we had a lot of complexity in the responsive design and a lot of interactivity that we had to anticipate for this global search form, as well as our menu in both open and closed states. So now that we'll get into more straightforward content, things should be moving along pretty quickly here. We'll be able to establish a lot of the typography and layout for our article, as well as get into the section selector and related article cards. So thank you so much for watching. In the next episode, we'll continue on with styling the remaining UI of our project, hopefully tackling the article layout and then seeing how far we can get from there.